and is now senior advisor for the organization. Under her leadership, they've organized statewide campaigns reaching over 500,000 young people, immigrants and refugee voters of color specifically. They built long-term infrastructure and capacity of grassroots immigrant and refugee organizations across the state to run electoral and issue campaigns, and established a sister organization, Power CA Action. She's a Levi Strauss Foundation Pioneers and Justice Fellow. She sits on the board of 18 Million Rising. She holds a Master of Health Sciences from Johns Hopkins. She was born in Manila, grew up in Mumbai, and now lives with her family in Oakland, California. Her son is the amazing young person who came and asked the question on the first day of Haben. You remember him, Koyo? Yes. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome to the stage Aparna Shah. Please give it up. You are loved. Except for the Nike plug on the live stream.
Hello? Ah.
I skipped 6.
Wow, those lights are bright.
5, 7.
Magandang hapon. That means good afternoon in Tagalog. So, magandang hapon.
Yeah, that's the thing. Rebrand.
Day 3, afternoon. We have been moved by dance, by prayer, by ritual, by people's spirits, by all of who people are, and the 7 generations before, and the 7 generations ahead. So, magandang hapon. Thank you. We are here right now to talk about the urgency of bridging, and we have an amazing, amazing panel. I'm so excited to share, and I am a total fangirl for all of these 4 amazing people who are going to come on the stage. So the first person I'm going to talk about is Ben McBride and Jennifer Martinez with Pico, California. Ben is a native of San Francisco and a longtime activist for peace and justice in the Bay Area. In 2008, he relocated his family to a neighborhood in Oakland called the Kill Zone to understand and respond to the epidemic of gun violence firsthand. In 2012, Ben was an instrumental component of relaunching Oakland's first successful iteration of Operation Ceasefire. This strategy has contributed heavily to a near 40% reduction in homicides over the last 5 years. Over the last 3 years, he's trained over 100 departments and law enforcement executives while in partnership with California's Department of Justice. Ben joined Pico, California in 2015, the state's largest community organizing network, and currently serves as co-director. He funded the Trust Through Reform Project, a statewide initiative in 14 cities to address the community-police relationship while serving as the co-chair for the Department of Justice's Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board. Ben is deeply committed to widening the circle of human concern, if you can't already tell, leading to a more vibrant, inclusive society. He and his wife, Janelle, have been married for 19 years and have 3 daughters. They live here in Oakland, California. Ben McBride. Jennifer Martinez, sitting next to Ben, is brilliant and amazing and is the Chief Strategy Officer for Pico, California. She's been an organizer since 2001, when her work was focused on housing justice, immigrant rights, restorative justice, and quality education. Today, Jennifer and her team work with dozens of organizations and hundreds of organizers across California to develop long-term strategies that tackle the systemic drivers of racial and economic inequality. She has a BA from Stanford, an MA and PhD from the University of Nottingham, England. Her graduate research focused on social movement strategies in the struggle for housing and land rights in Venezuela and South Africa. She was born into a Mexican-Irish family in Southern California and now lives here in the Bay Area. How lucky for us. If we could cue up the Pico video, and just to show that first.
As people of faith and values, we believe in the possibility of renewal and rebirth. We invite you on a journey in 2019 to reimagine a Pico, California, rooted in equity and inclusion that allows us to co-create a roadmap for our work into a more powerful future.
With your help over the next 12 months, we will develop a shared vision and blueprint that guides our efforts over the next 10 years to become a new people, with stronger organizations ready to take on the challenges before us.
We believe that the wrong first question is, what do we need to do? The right first question is, who do we need to become? And how does that becoming work inform our strategy so that we are truly building a new California where everyone belongs, everyone thrives, and everyone has agency over their lives?
And we have the systems and structures that protect that reality. We are in a time where the dominant narrative is that the only way we can be safe is to segregate ourselves from people who are different from us, to dig in our heels around defending our uniqueness and increasing our suspicion of our neighbors.
But this next year will be about the opposite for us. 2019 will be the year of becoming and belonging in California, where we are building deep relationships with each other across difference, and we are strengthening our skills so that our voter engagement efforts are changing hearts and minds and helping us awaken 1 million more voters by 2020.
We will be passing laws that will protect the most vulnerable among us, that will be responsive to families victimized by police violence, families separated by detention and incarceration, and ensuring every Californian has a roof over their head.
These next 2 years are some of the most critical of our lifetimes as we prepare to define who we want to be and where we want to go in the future, as communities, as a people, as California.
Ben's really loving seeing himself and hearing himself right there. The next two panelists we have are Desmond Meade and Neil Voles from the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. I'm going to read their bios, but first I'm going to tell you all what I told them in the green room. This campaign, this coalition that they built, and this enduring movement is one of the absolute highlights, not just of 2018, but of like the last decade.
Yeah.
1.8 plus million folks who are part of the carceral system who now have the right to vote in Florida.
Oh, man.
So my little immigrant fangirl heart is forever indebted to you all. Desmond Meade, JD, is a formerly homeless returning citizen who overcame many obstacles to become the current executive director of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition. He's the chair of Floridans for a Fair Democracy, chair of the Florida Coalition on Black Civic Participation's Black Men's Roundtable, and a graduate of Florida International University School of Law. As president of the FRRC and chair of Floridians for a Fair Democracy, Desmond led the successful Amendment 4 campaign, which established voting rights for over, this says 1.4 million, my number evidently was wrong, Floridians with a prior felony conviction. A sought-after speaker, Desmond has been invited to speak for national entities and events such as the APSA, Inequality, Democracy, and America's Future event, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, the 2018 Unrig Summit, and Bread for the World. He's also testified before congressional members and staff and was a part of the delegation to the United Nations, where he gave testimony regarding disenfranchisement in Florida. He's a frequent guest and contributor on national news outlets and has appeared on Full Frontal with Samantha Bee, Al Jazeera, Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman, MSNBC's AM Joy Reid, and MSNBC's former Melissa Harris Perry show. Mr. Meade has served as a columnist for the Huffington Post, interviewed by journalists from publications such as Color Lines, The Atlantic, Politic 365, The Washington Post, Orlando Sentinel, and The New York Times. He's married and has 5 beautiful children. Next to him, Neil Volz has more than 25 years of experience working as a public servant and community advocate, including work as the Chief of Staff for a congressional member and Staff Director for a full congressional committee, as well as Outreach Director for one of the fastest growing churches in the country and Program Director for a leading community-based organization that serves formerly homeless veterans. When in Washington, Neil helped negotiate and secure passage for the Help America Vote Act, which improved voting accessibility and accuracy for millions of people. You notice a trend? Neil received his Bachelor of Science degree from Ohio State, lives in Fort Myers, Florida with his wife, Pam, and is the chairman of the Lee County Homeless Coalition. Neil Volz. Can we cue up the FRRC video, please?
Amendment 4 is a constitutional amendment that will restore the eligibility to vote for individuals who have previously been convicted of a felony offense. The requirement is that they must complete all portions of their sentence as ordered by a judge, and once that occurs, then they're able to have the eligibility to vote. The amendment, however, would not apply to individuals who are convicted of murder or individuals who are convicted of felony sexual offenses. It is so easy in Florida to get a felony conviction. You know, something as simple as burning a tire in public or driving with a suspended license or releasing helium-filled balloons. Those things can allow someone to get a felony conviction, and if they live in Florida, that they would lose their rights for life.
You see that play out in the court system. 75% of the people who are sentenced with felony convictions actually aren't sentenced to prison. So people are in our communities, in our church pews, sometimes our pastors, our bosses, they're working with us, they're at school. And so this really is something that impacts everybody.
The reality is in Florida, African Americans only account for a third of the people who have lost their rights to vote. And when you talk about people who are in prison, we have to understand that Florida convicts over 170,000 people each year. Out of that 170,000, less than 25% are even sentenced to prison. So the overwhelming majority of people who we're talking about who are impacted are people who, number one, do not look like me, and number two, are not coming out of prison. And so that just destroys that narrative or that myth that was built on the thing that, well, African Americans always get in trouble. They're the majority of the people in prison. This is for people that are in prison, so therefore African Americans are going to vote Democrat. We are fighting just as hard, if not harder, for that person that wished they could have voted for Donald Trump as that person that wanted to vote for Barack Obama. What we care about is that once you've completely served all portions of your sentence, that you be given the opportunity to have your voice heard.
So we're here today to talk, of course, about bridging and the urgency of bridging. Particularly across, let me take a step back. Just a reminder, on Monday, brothers Vincent and Lewis reminded us that we're on traditional Ohlone land, that this is the home of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, and they speak the Chochenyo language, and this is the Ho-Chun area. Thank you for allowing us to be here. One more time. We're here to talk about bridging across differences, about listening, about engaging, about organizing, about practicing, at the heart of it, about building power and love with each other and with ourselves. We're here to talk about the bigger we, because this is what everyone on this stage has been creating and what we are all doing here collectively, about where we all belong and about our collective power to co-create. Auntie Casey, I hope I can call her that, this morning said to us, this is the beginning of the future that we are creating together. This is where we are going to talk about building and strengthening relationships, about struggle, solidarity, and liberation together, and how we move ultimately at the speed of trust. Everyone before you today has been, for decades now, building shared infrastructure, reclaiming folks who have been in the carceral system as part of the bigger we, and building beloved community across partisan, faith, ethnic, racial, and the many ways that we break with each other and we break our interdependence with each other. Sister Haben on Monday reminded us that it is communities who create inclusion, who create belonging, and when we choose to be inclusive and to belong with each other, we role model that for the rest of our communities, and we influence others to make that choice. So, saying that, I'm wondering, Desmond, if you can tell us a little bit about why. Why was this the work that you were called upon? Why is it that you felt this need, this urgent need for bridging? And what was the reaction from both peers, from opposition, and from your people?
Thank you so much for that question. Testing, mic check. All right. What I said was thank you so much for that question. I think that why started in the depths of hell, in the depths of darkness. When I found myself standing in front of railroad tracks, waiting on a train to come so I can jump in front of it. At the time, I was homeless. I was addicted to drugs. I was recently released from prison, and I didn't see any hope, any light at the end of the tunnel. But that moment there, when I was waiting and thinking about the pain that I had to suffer, I think speaks to the why. And the reason why I say that is because coming from that space, eventually the train didn't come, as you can tell, and I did cross those tracks. But it created a moment where, number one, I had to ask what my purpose was in life, because nobody would have came to my funeral if I would have died that day on those tracks. But it also started that journey, understanding that as I'm a person of Christian faith, and as a child of God, that my purpose here was to give back. And it wasn't just to give back to any specific type of person, but to give back to folks that was in need, right? Regardless of race, regardless of political affiliations, all of that stuff. It was just basically giving back to another child of God, and I'd seen that everybody that I came in contact with, before I'd seen what their preferences were or their ideologies were, what I'd seen was another human being, another child of God, and there was something there that connected us. And so that started me on that journey, that why. And it just so happened that as a formerly convicted and incarcerated individual, I sat at the heart of the issue. And I couldn't just walk away from it, because it was a part of my life. It was who I am. And so I had to figure out, how to get out of it. And in that process, I used a technique or just the principles that, we are all God's children. I don't have a monopoly on the suffering, and I definitely don't have a monopoly on the solution. Right, and so I know that if we were going to do this, we had to do this together. But ironically, when I started out, the narrative would have me think that this was solely an African American issue. But as I started traveling the state of Florida, what I seen was that there were way more white folks who were impacted, and a lot of them didn't think like me, but they suffered just like me. They may not have had the same experiences that I had, but they were suffering in their reality. And so I had to, but I really had to just really understand that, at the end of the day, what we seen was another human being in need.
Thank you. If you'd like to.
When I think about the why of bridging, I think we were kind of talking about this a little bit earlier, is holding this notion that behind every political reality or manifestation of violence or pain is a spiritual conundrum. And if we only respond to the political reality or the manifestation of violence, we will simply just start off another process that ultimately will create more manifestations of violence and political rallies down the road. And so I think for us, And for me, the why behind bridging was recognizing that we are in a very complicated world and scenario where if we don't figure out how to rediscover our interrelatedness to one another across difference, then we simply will perpetuate the same world that some of us are already victims of. And to, in some of my, spiritual language, since I am the one up here with the collar on, I would say I think there's a real important lesson from the Jewish scriptures and the stories around this notion of leaving an oppressive place and going in search of a promised land. And oftentimes, I think why we have to bridge is because what's the purpose of getting to the promised land if you become Pharaoh on your sojourn? Ooh. Right? So I think there's this deeper ontological question around who we need to become and how do we need to develop the kind of imagination to bridge across difference where we can become hard on systems, still remain soft on people, and don't lose our ability to see the humanity of those who are different from us. Because I think when we do that, no matter what political reality we achieve, we will have already lost.
I told you they were amazing. Next question. I think the videos, some of the things I really loved in the videos are in the Pico video when you all talked about this is really about who we're called to be in this moment. And I'm wondering, Jen, if you could talk a little bit about what it is specifically that you all are doing around bridging and looking to do in the next few years.
Can I make a little confession first? Ears perked up. So when I first heard Ben and his counterpart Joseph say to us, what we really need to ask is who we need to become, I was like, oh dear God. Did we just get real soft? Because I came into this work as an organizer to get political. I was interested in structural economy, the takedown of capitalism, structural racism, this kind of hardcore stuff in my mind. But 2 years ago, when the invitation came of like, who are we going to become, and this idea of bridging, I really thought, I'm not sure what to do with this. So in that frame of mind, it was really hard for me to take on this idea of the bridging as actually an urgent matter. So in some ways, I'm saying that because I want to invite some curiosity if you're feeling a little bit of that. Maybe you're here in this conference because you're not feeling a little bit of that. But if you happen to be, this for me has been a real journey into discovering precisely what Ben was talking about. That much of the political aspirations and social change aspirations that I hold very deeply must be met also with a spiritual transformation. And so the work that we're trying to do is help people not just understand it from an intellectual perspective, but actually experience it in their bodies and in their relationship with each other. So we have embarked on really probably a 5 to 10 year process. We've said 12 months in that video, but 6 weeks later we realized it wasn't going to be just 12 months. And what we're doing is we're inviting people into what we're calling bridging and belonging circles, where they are going to be in conversations. We're hoping to have 1,000 circles with 10 people, so 10,000 people this year going through an experience together that is about creating a shared sense of purpose, understanding each other's stories, recognizing the context in which we're living and why this matter is so deeply urgent, and how it is in fact connected to the structural changes that we are seeking to make. And we've got some big ones in California. We're going after Prop 13. You're on that train, right? You're going after Prop 13. We're going after criminal justice system. We're defending immigrants. We're going after renter protections. These are not small issues with small opposition. And yet, we're seeing that the pathway for us to be able to build the kind of power that we truly and authentically need to accomplish these things together are only going to be found in our ability to awaken the power within and between us that requires bridging.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Neil, in the video and in your work, at the heart of it, what you all are doing and have been doing is really centering some of the most impacted people. So could you talk a little bit about what bridging has looked like for you all and is looking like in this moment and moving forward?
Yeah, well, one, thanks for the question. Thanks for being here. It's great to see everybody. Love hearing these conversations. For us, this whole movement really has been built along the lines of humanity, right? And built on the pain that Desmond kind of talked about, right? Because at the time, Florida was one of 4 states that permanently barred people from voting. And so you had millions of people and family members who were directly impacted by these policies. And what we saw over time, and what we saw when I met Desmond in 2015, was that the disenfranchisement, this idea that our identities were impacted by these policies. Like, we weren't allowed to be Republicans or Democrats in our state. We didn't have a voice. So what binded us together was our shared humanity. And over time, we have our shirts, "Let My People Vote," and having a white guy walk around in some events with a "Let My People Vote" on shirt, it stirred these conversations that got to the core of belonging, right? We're a part of the same movement. And ultimately we realized when we all talked about us belonging together, white, black, gay, straight, we were all disenfranchised. We also began to see that we were an example to the rest of the state, that we could operate along the lines of humanity and transcend some of these divisions along race, the divisions along economics, the divisions along partisanship. Those are real issues, and that's a part of our conversations. But we were able to walk in such a way that I think a lot of people were like, wow, what's that all about? And you end up in November with 65% of the vote and 40% of the people who voted for the Republican governor candidate voting for Amendment 4. And that led to some even more wonderful conversations about how we all belong together. So as we look forward, we're going to continue to do the same things that we've done, which is build a movement around people and along the lines of humanity. And then what we do is we also talk from the frame of reference of values. We would walk throughout the state and talk about things like when the debt's paid, it's paid, and that this was an everybody movement, that it was a movement of all walks of life. And we realized that when you meet somebody face to face, you meet them at the coffee shop, you meet them where they are, as human to human, that suddenly a lot of those differences melt away, and we can rally around simple values that propel us into the ability to change policy that impacts millions of lives. So that's kind of the heartbeat behind what we're doing.
Thank you. So the work that you all are doing is really pushing out the boundaries of what we imagine to be both politically feasible and viable, and what we just imagine to be. I'm wondering, Jen, if you could talk a little bit about how this changes sort of the traditional ways that we approach our work in the field.
Yeah, well, if you couldn't tell from my earlier comments, I run our political shop at Pico, California. And so, I came into this year really prepared to talk about voting and to talk about winning stuff at the state legislature. And we're counting votes essentially all the time in one way or another. And the tools that we use to count votes are very transactional. It's like check here for yes, check there for no. And when we started this conversation about bridging and belonging, first I was like, oh yeah, we'll just add the adjective at the beginning of our statement or at the end or something, right? Like oh yeah, this is about bridging. Will you sign here now? So, and I was by this time I was on board. I had gotten a little bit of, Ben is a very convincing person, and I was on board and my spirit was in it, but my mind hadn't yet gotten around to the fact that in order, Reverend Trina, who was one of our executive directors, laughing because she knows this is true, but I hadn't gotten my mind around the fact that, in fact, it's not just a word or a communication style that we needed to change. We actually needed to change we still need to change every aspect of the organization, because our organization wasn't designed to do bridging work. Our organization was designed to operate in a breaking world and to perpetuate that breaking world in ways that we weren't even, and still probably aren't, aware of. We're having to rethink the kind of tools we're using to talk to people at the doors about how they're going to vote. We're going to transform the technological tools we're using, the material tools. We're having to rethink about how are we training folks, not in the 2-hour version of a training, but we're going to need to deeply involve them months and months earlier in order for them to be prepared in their heart and mind to go to people whom they may not know and engage them in a totally different way. This is requiring a top to bottom evaluation of all the kinds of work that we're doing and how we do it, so that we can actually deeply, deeply embody the bridging, because we are confronting a breaking world, and that means we need to be able to be prepared for when that breaking happens for us to respond in a totally different way. So that is also requiring a lot of negotiation with our partners who don't necessarily think that we're on to the, just want the numbers of voters, for example. And I'm laughing with Aparna because we are partners in that work. And we're having to recalibrate all of the commitments we've made and start to renegotiate them as well. We think that it will result in a better outcome. Then in fact, we'll be able to achieve our shared goals if we can do this work, but it's going to take us a minute to figure out how.
So that question kind of perked me up a little bit because, when you think about, Florida, you think about felons, you think about voting. Those are like 3 toxic subjects, right? And you put those 3 together, especially in this type of political climate, that's a recipe for disaster. There is no way that some amendment to restore voting rights to 1.4, there's no way that should even get on the ballot. There's no way that should even come close to passing. But it did, and it did with no opposition. It did with endorsements from Christian Coalition, even from the Koch brothers, right? Our naturally perceived opposition. And that experience of the campaign, and I'm talking about experience from the time it was birthed through a vision that God gave me to what happened on November, it opened my eyes to a lot of things. And it really, challenged me to, challenge folks in our campaign that maybe we first need to start, number one, looking more internally, right? And rethinking what the opposition really is. Mm-hmm. A lot of folks would be surprised to know that 95% of the heartache that I received did not come from opposition. It came from allies and friends.
Right.
And to understand that some of the people that stood in the paint, when you talk about a person who I call my brother, Neil, you have a white conservative guy that I was brought up to believe that we're not even supposed to be sitting next to each other. And so when we learned that, when we start looking internal, because it's internal where we can solve the majority of our problems, we start seeing about these labels that some puppet master up there have us buy into, right? Whether it's a progressive label that changes every 2 or 3 years, so I don't even understand that piece, but what it does is that when we, and that was the difference with our campaign, because when we launch things, we tend to label ourselves. And when we do that, we eliminate or we limit who can talk to us and who we can talk to, right? And so we automatically start out with separation, saying it's you guys and it's us. We launched in a way that removed every label. We wouldn't even let our executive committee or anybody label us as a bipartisan campaign or even a nonpartisan campaign. We insisted that it was led with people. And so it was an organic grassroots movement that welcomed and enjoyed bipartisan support. We led with the people because we believed that if we lead with people first, over all these other labels, then that allows us to have, to come in close proximity with other people and have real live conversations with folks, and that's where the transformation happens, right? It allows us that proximity.
Yeah, I mean, I would just want to build on what Dee is saying. I think it's incredibly important, particularly for those of us that are in the center-left organizing political movement, right? Because we've figured out how to activate people by, at times, leveraging breaking and othering, right? So we're gonna talk about the boogeyman that's in the closet and get everybody all woke up and throw some hot rhetoric at folks and get people all agitated and irritated, and they supposed to be coming to us to figure out how to build some power. We get folks activated, right? And we'll get people to win that short-lived political game, but we haven't even figured out how to help folks bridge in the center-left movement, right? Like oftentimes when we had a conversation about bridging, right, people are like, so you want us to go talk to, some racist folks sitting somewhere on the, on the back stairs with a Confederate flag smoking a stogie. That's not the conversation we saying might need to happen. That's a conversation that needs to happen. But what we're also offering is we have invited people into transactional relationships for the purpose of accomplishing a political goal. And as soon as that electoral or legislative campaign is over, those transactional relationships dissipate. And I don't know about you, but as a black dude that's living in this society, I don't need no allies. I need siblings. I need relatives. I need people that are willing to be down, not when it's politically convenient, right? I need people that's willing to stand on the front lines with me in Ferguson. I need people that's also willing to come to the table and have conversations with folks with power. We've got to figure out how to bridge even in our movements and deal with the breaking that's happening across race, across identity, across status, across ideas. We know the people closest to the problem are closest to the solutions, but we haven't figured out how to really create the kind of space that's necessary that centers formerly incarcerated and directly impact the folks in our movements. So the bridging work we need to do is not just about in service to a campaign or verbal judo or learning how to say the right thing or say a different thing. We got to figure out how to become different versions of ourselves as a movement, as a collective, right? It doesn't mean that we all got to do the same thing, but we all got to do something. And I think in this moment, it is incredibly critical that we figure out how to bridge within our movements, how to figure out how to hold space together so that the goal is not just about passing the legislation, which is important, but how do we also begin to think about redefining the win? And what if the win is not just about what happens on the voting day, but what if the win is about us rediscovering our heritage? That we belong to one another. And no matter what this evil system tells us, we can hold on to that and live from that reality.
Wow. Yeah.
Right on.
That's it.
I told you he's very convincing. Yeah.
Follow that one.
Well, it makes me think of yesterday evening for folks that were here in the room. For the fire panel, just like this one, with Sisters Morningstar, Linda, Charlene, and Saru. Fire. And I think it was Sister Linda who said, we don't need more allies. We need to, that's what you said, we need to know that when we are fighting, that you will be right next to me and have my back, no matter what it is. And that's what we've been hearing for the last 3 days. That this is about where we find ourselves belly button to belly button with each other, or side by side with each other, and that we know we will fight for each other. We will, last night the words were fighting, sacrificing, laying down, and being with each other in struggle and in liberation. So that, I think, is the extraordinary power of what you are all doing. Having said that, I'm wondering if you all could talk a little bit about what does it mean and what does it take for the kind of sort of public commitment that you were talking about as PICO, and then what you all are doing. What is the next, not incremental, but the next transformative leap that includes all of us, that includes our whole selves and our whole communities.
You talk about a leap. I believe that, what the world seen in November when Amendment 4 passed was something greater than just a reenfranchisement of 1.4 million folks. We had over 5.1 million votes, right? And there were 1 million more votes than any candidate received on that ballot. But those 5.1 million votes was not based on hate. They weren't based on fear. Those were votes that was based on love, forgiveness, and redemption, right? And so when I hear that word leap, and you talk about what does it take, the first thing that came to my mind is courage. But I think it's courage not to necessarily take a leap, but to go back, right? To go back to our natural state.
Yes, sir.
Right? And what I mean by that, because in a lot of these spaces, we're indoctrinated with some rhetoric that causes division. But if any one of us leave right now and we get on the expressway and we run across an accident, and we get out of our car to help, we run up to that person, that first question is not going to be, did you vote for Donald Trump? It's not going to be how much you make. That first question is going to be, are you okay? How can I help? That is something that's just naturally within us. When I think about the hurricanes a couple years back, that image of that African-American man in a boat rescuing a white guy in Texas and stopped to let him go back to get his Confederate flag. In spite of the hate and the racism that flag represented, he was able to, in that moment, overlook that, and what he seen was another human being in need. And I don't think that it's a leap for us to get there. I think that is something that is naturally within us. And so you want to talk about the next big thing is how do we reawaken what God has naturally placed inside of us?
Talk to him.
And that is that disposition to care about our fellow man in spite of what they may do, they may say, or how they may act. How do we love each other? And I think that the awakening of love was on full display in November. And we are very hopeful, and we have the faith to believe that it is a start in turning this country in the right direction, understanding that this is a very simple premise. There is no me without you. None. And so I must want for my neighbor what I want for myself, and I must commit myself to making sure that I am advocating and I'm fighting so that my neighbor is treated with dignity and respect, no matter what their gender is, no matter what their race is, no matter what their status is, that they're a human being, another child of God, and they deserve me standing in the paint for them.
So one of the things that you're making me think about is this practice we're starting to do together in our organization, which is when we get triggered, turn to wonder. And I've been thinking about that a lot in this context, because oftentimes the thing that we'll do is we turn to aggression and enact, with or without meaning to, some kind of breaking behavior. And this idea of, can I be curious? Can I be curious about somebody else? And can I be curious about myself? Like, what's in me that reacts in that way? And can I understand it more deeply and choose, not react, but choose something else? And we've been talking a lot about that as building that into our practice and organizational practice, because it's in that breath that maybe God can be. And again, I'm also going to speak from my spiritual understanding, is that the divine can enter into the space and help us take that leap forward. I don't think that I have it in me yet, but if I invite the breath, maybe it will be given to me.
Yeah, I must say, when I hear these stories, I think about the first time I got involved in this movement in 2015. You know, I had gotten a felony conviction 13 years ago, and part of my experience was that I moved to Florida before I even knew that I wouldn't be able to vote, and active in conservative politics for a long time. The first job I got was at my church, and I began to feel that family feeling. And one of my fellow family members ended up getting in trouble. He took a phone from McDonald's right after high school graduation. And in context, please know, by that point, several people had suggested that I get involved in this movement, and I was in this spot of still dealing with my own shame and my anger and how I let people down. And so I didn't want to get involved. But it was watching a young man go to jail for 40 days for taking a phone, and the family reaction, and realizing that if he looked like me as a white guy, he was going to have a much different experience than I did. And we were family, and we know each other. We're still friends. Our families talked in the last week. And so for me, it was no surprise that 3 days later, I happened to be on a college campus, and Desmond's there. He's talking about this felon disenfranchisement issue. And I walked into the room, and the truth is, right away, I felt a little progressive-y to me. Right, and that isn't my background, so I'm being vulnerable here. And I'm like, oh no, I think I might be the only fire hydrant at the all-dog party. And within 30 seconds, no lie, and from that moment going forward, Desmond created an environment in which I belonged. Like, I knew that my story mattered in this space. And from every moment going forward to collecting petitions at Trump rallies and going to biker events and we had fishing tournaments with folks, you know, who became a part of a movement that was transcended kind of what we typically think. And it rallied around people, and it rallied around some common ideas about expanding democracy and ideas that our voices matter. And I think there's real power in that when you can kind of connect. And we're encouraged about that going forward, because we're starting to hear some of the same naysayers. Like, you can't build a movement that transcends all these differences. We've heard it once before, and now as we move forward, you start to hear some of that again. And I think we're pretty excited about the opportunity to try and keep moving forward in a way that puts people first and then can transform policies, not just change them on the margins, but really transform our criminal justice system in the state, really transform the way we see each other, and move the state forward in the process. So I'm always grateful to him because of that environment he set in the very first meeting that I think reflects kind of some of the things that we're talking about.
I really love all of this, and particularly the idea that we have to start with ourselves, and that we start here, and then that is where we go out from, and that from this transformation at the individual and internal level comes out all the way into the systemic and the structural and the global change that we're all here to make happen for that collective future for our next 7 generations. So I'm wondering if you could share, I know our time is coming to a close, if y'all could share a little bit about your vision moving forward, about what it is that you imagine, that you hope, that you dream, that you know we will accomplish together, and how you will get there.
Everybody, I'm gonna turn y'all into a black church for a moment. Don't worry, you'll be all right.
Preach.
Everybody say Bill. Say bridge. Say belong. So I think as we're thinking about moving forward and thinking about what our vision is, we need to figure out how to travel the journey to build a shared identity. Doesn't mean that we're disappearing the beautiful tribal identities that we all come from. I'm black, been black my whole life, never want to be nothing else, right? And they certainly ain't gonna let me be nothing else, but I don't want to be nothing else either, right? But we need to figure out how to build a shared identity that is made up of our collective experiences, and we've got to do that by bridging across differences. Learning how to build muscle memory in us so that we're learning how to turn to wonder, how to bridge with folks who are different from us, so that ultimately we don't just sit around the table and have a kumbaya moment, but we can create structures and systems of belonging. And so that is, I think, the vision that really inspires me. I don't want to dethrone the people who are in power right now just to become them. And then to create a whole new caste system of oppressed people. The thing that scares me and keeps me up at night is I could look at the white, evangelical, red hat wearing conservatives and see the toxicity in their language, in their behavior, and many of them can't see it. Right? I've been in a relationship with a lot of these folks that can't see it. My fear is that in 40 years, if we're not careful, if we don't put love at the center of our work, we will be the blue hat wearing progressives who are full of the same kind of toxicity and not be able to know it. That's what keeps me up at night. So I think our vision is to figure out how do we bring love back, where when you're talking about love, it don't feel like you soft now, you done gave up the movement and you ain't trying to be about that life. We're all way about that life, but we need to figure out how to put love back at the center of our movement and really trust in the power of the human spirit to be able to bring us forward. We need to be working with all of y'all across not just this state, but across this country and start a movement of love and belongingness, get people to build, bridge, and belong so that we can figure out how we save the spirit of this nation.
And I'll just add on one thing. I think our vision is that we in California are creating a state of belonging. That our aspiration is that it's not belongingness between you and me, but that our state becomes one that reflects belonging in all of its systems. I think of neighborhoods and wanting to see people in homes and with good jobs and kids going to great schools and healthy, and we're diverse and we're not afraid of each other walking down the street. How can we create, we need to create a state of belonging, and part of the way we're gonna be able to do it is through this bridging work and changing the systems that right now force us into these different spaces away from each other. So our vision is really over the next 20 years that California becomes a state of belonging for everybody.
I personally don't have enough time to tell you the whole thing, but let me see if I could give you at least a portion of it. And just like Brother Ben, definitely love is at the center of all that we do. But what I see is that, one of the things I even tell my staff is that don't just identify the problem, come with the solution. Yeah. And sometimes we're so geared up to think that our purpose is to create the problem or to address the problem, or make the problem known. But, we believe our purpose is to come to a solution, right? And so I could be soft on love, but that love got empowered 1.4 million Floridians in Florida. You know what I'm saying? And I think that at the end of the day, it's about changing people's lives. And so how do we be courageous enough to create a dynamic where, and we've had this happen to us where we actually did a liberation training, and in that training was some white country guys, conservative guys, that was a big Donald Trump fan or whatever, but he was in that training with us as a brother. And at the end of that training, we did that centering piece that we always do, and that stuck with him, and he talked about how it reminded him of that moment when he goes hunting right before a deer comes into the line of the scope, that moment of peace, and how when the trainer, who was a Black Lives Matter, Black Liberation trainer, didn't even know that he had somebody like that in the training, found out in the proximity how both of them learned. How that person that was so used to having an enemy and having a vision of a picture of an enemy realized that he was fellowshipping with the same person that he'd been trained to hate. And all he could think about was love for that person and how that person transformed him. We can learn from each other. That's it. Right? And we can transform each other and not be scared of that transformation, right? And I think if we're in that space, we get that courage that we would find that we have more that are in common with each other than what separates us. And I think that is the power that takes us over that edge where we're able to shed the labels, right, and hold on to humanity as our driving force.
Thank you. I think that's right. I think there's real power in being in proximity to people who see things differently and do things differently. I know I struggle with kind of self-selection, you know, like what I watch, what I see, that I naturally want to take in information and then I process it in a certain way. Desmond has been one of the biggest blessings in my entire life. He's a brother. I love him. He's family. And we have family all around us who see and operate a little bit differently, but that the lines of humanity are so tight, and we've built this kind of network of folks who have shared experiences, but also have different experiences. And I think that gets to your point, man. That was so cool to hear you say, you know, kind of cast that vision, because I think that I see a lot of that toxicity, you know, and we can do better. Like, the truth is, we don't all have to disagree, and sometimes you just got to vote it out, right? And count the votes and move on. And then there's other times where you can talk about transcendent conversations like this one. And I know I'm going to walk away from it because I've had to learn. You know, that moment I described about before meeting Des, you know, I knew there was a grace side, I knew there was a justice side, and I knew that there was a mercy side to this entire Amendment 4 walk. But I've had to learn a little bit more about the justice side, growing up the way that I grew up, with, you know, being a white guy and my life experiences. And so being able to have grace to walk into that learning without, that allowed us to grow tighter and grow forward, as opposed to, you know, trigger each other in certain ways. The last thing I would say is I would walk at a lot of doors and a lot of conservative places, and people would say, hey, you did the crime, you did the time, you know, that kind of deal. And I had to learn how to ask questions in that moment. Like, I'm somebody asking for grace, so it's like, okay, and Des is so good at this. You know, like, ask them, give them grace. Well, why do you think that? And over and over and over again, with one conversation, you could see somebody go from a no to a yes. And that's the difference between bad policy and good policy.
That's good. That's good. I gotta share this, because Neil said he had to learn. Let me tell you all. When Neil first came on to the FRC, one of the first things I did, I called him up one day and said, Neil, I need you to drive a van of our leaders to Alabama to work on that, I think Doug Jones, the campaign, right? And Neil was like, sure. Little did he know I was sticking him in a van full of African Americans, half of them straight black liberators, right? And here's this guy having to drive a van full of African American liberators to Alabama, which stops at the Edmonds-Pettus Bridge, right? And so he was forced to be in proximity, and I didn't tell him, you know, but let me tell you, when he came back, it was like what Moses probably looked like after he had that encounter with the burning bush. I tell you. But that proximity is so crucial. Yeah. It's so crucial.
So sadly, we have to wrap up because the time is ticking down so quickly. Before I ask you all for final comments, I want to take the invitation that Jennifer offered us to take a breath together. So we've heard about an invitation to step fully into our own and into our collective spirit, into our own and our collective grace, and into our own and our collective courage. So I just want to ask all of you if you could take 1 minute, which I know will put us over our time, to just give us your final comments today, knowing that this conversation and this work and these bonds that we are building and have built will continue hopefully much longer than any of us are alive, and much longer than our children and our children's children, whether birthed or chosen, are alive.
I guess I could go real quick and just say that this conversation, this experience, this shared experience has been inspiring and encouraging to me. And I feel like I'm learning, and I love that moment, because that means that real relationships are happening, and that the door's open, and that give and take is going on. And so that we truly do belong together in that way. And so I'm just really grateful to be here. And
All right, so obviously he's ceded some of that time to me because it's just a minute. So those of us who are parents out here probably heard this before. If we don't have that conversation with our children about sex, somebody else will, right? And I think that applies also to the work that we're doing, because what we've seen even in the last election was that we had ignored a subsection of people, right? And somebody came along and spoke to them. Might not have been telling them the right things, but somebody spoke to people who were ignored. And so I think it is vitally important that we expand who we talk to, because what we have inside of us and the love that we have inside of us should not just be contained to just a certain set of people. It should be spread out with everyone. And so I want to just leave you all with that. Don't be afraid to talk to the stranger. Talk to people who might not agree with you or might not look like you, because if what you have is pure, and if your intentions is really grounded in love for humanity, love for a better world, then some of that will rub off and it will be transformational. That encounter will cause people to shift.
I love being on this journey, and at times it's very challenging, but I love that when you talked about it's the invitation to transform oneself. So I feel deeply grateful for this conversation and for the journey that we're on together.
I would just say as my final word that we are exactly who we need in this moment. There's nobody else coming, and we actually don't need anybody else to come. Everything that is necessary for us to move into our tomorrow is here in our today. So may we trust the power of the divine that is within us and all around us, and let's be willing to take some risks that challenge the status quo. Let's commit ourselves to being prophetic voices over religious echoes, and let's figure out recognizing that hope is always living in our proverbial neighborhoods, but it doesn't make it into our reality unless we cross the street. Let's make some bold steps in our organizations, in our communities, in the way in which we relate to one another to take some steps, and let's manifest the world that we all want to belong to.
Thank you.
Give it up for Kale. Give it up once more for Ben McBride, for Aparna Shah, for Jennifer Martinez, for Desmond Meade, and Neil Vos. That panel felt urgent to me. It felt like church in so many ways. So we're gonna pass a collection plate. Oh, you're laughing now when we start talking about resources. It's all fun and games. I kid, but seriously. We're gonna move into our keynote for the afternoon. We're coming to one of our very last sessions of the day. Thank you for being as present as you've been. Thank you for being as engaged as you've been. I want to congratulate you on that last session for speaking back in the midst of it. I heard you. It was great to hear your voices through that panel from the very backstage, so thank you for engaging. It's my honor to introduce our keynote, and I'm going to give him the full measure of his intro so that we can turn the stage over. So please bear with me and listen close. The Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II is a pastor. Yes. Right out the gates, you know. So, okay, good. Church then. I said his name. Well done. The Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II is a pastor and social justice advocate building a broad-based grassroots movement grounded in the moral tenets of faith-based communities and the Constitution to confront systemic racism, poverty, environmental devastation, the war economy, and the distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism in America today. As pastor of Greenleaf Christian Church in Greensboro, North Carolina since 1993, and president of the North Carolina Conference of the NAACP from 2005 to 2017, Barber approaches social justice through the lens of the ethical and moral treatment of people as laid out in the Christian Bible, the Reconstruction and Civil Rights Movement of the South, and the United States Constitution. He is effective at building unusually inclusive fusion coalitions that are multiracial and interfaith, reaching across race, gender, age, and class lines, and dedicated to addressing poverty, inequality, and systemic racism. When his work came to expand voting rights, healthcare, living wages, immigrant rights, public education, and LGBTQ rights, when his work was thwarted by extremist state lawmakers in North Carolina, Barber began a series of Moral Monday rallies outside the State House in Raleigh to protest laws that suppress voter turnout, cut funding for public education and healthcare, and further disenfranchise poor white, Black, First Nation, and LGBTQ communities. The Moral Mondays rallies and associated nonviolent acts of civil disobedience grew to involve tens of thousands of participants across North Carolina and spread to states across the South. The movement waged successful legal challenges to voter suppression and racial gerrymandering, winning twice at the Supreme Court. In 2014, Barber founded Repairers of the Breach, a leadership organization developed to expand and build a national movement rooted in moral analysis, moral articulation, and moral action. In 2016, he led a moral revival tour that covered 26 states and attracted thousands. In 2017, he and colleagues launched a revival of the 1968 Poor People's Campaign that was spearheaded by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and many others. Beginning with an audit of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, and the war economy in the US since 1968, the campaign has been recast for the 21st century, building state and local, nonpartisan, fusing movements committed to shifting the moral narrative, building power, and challenging laws and policies that hurt the poor and threaten our democracy. In 2018, the Poor People's Campaign launched 40 days of moral, nonviolent, civil disobedience in 40 states and in Washington, D.C., resulting in over 5,000 acts of simultaneous civil disobedience in 36 state capitals and the U.S. Capitol. Merging moral and activist traditions, Barber is providing a faith-based framework for action that strengthens civic engagement and inspires the country to imagine a more humane society. William Barber received a BA in 1985 from North Carolina Central University, a Master's of Divinity in 1989 from Duke University, and a Doctorate of Ministry in 2003 from Drew University. He also received 7 honorary doctorate degrees. From 2006 to 2017, Barber was president of the North Carolina chapter of the NAACP and has been a member of the National Board since 2005. He's a distinguished visiting professor at Union Theological Seminary. His publications include the co-authored books Forward Together, A Moral Message for the Nation, The Third Reconstruction, Moral Mondays, Fusion Politics, and the Rise of a New Justice Movement, and Revive Us Again, Vision and Action in Moral Organizing. He's a contributing op-ed writer for the New York Times, CNN, MSNBC, and the Washington Post. Barber's a 2018 MacArthur Fellow, a 2018 Tar Heel of the Year, an Auburn Seminary Senior Fellow, and holds the Visiting Social Justice Chair at St. John's University. We are so lucky, so blessed, so gifted with his presence. Please show your love, your undying love, for the Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II.
We must be honest about the foundation.
You guys are so great, and I messed up, but I love you, and I hope you love me back. I was supposed to have said, before he comes on stage, we're going to show this beautiful video from him.
But I know that America will never even get...
I love you. I messed up real good. I own it. A video.
We must be honest about the foundations of the political and economic systems we call America. I love America because of her potential, but I know that America will never even get close to being a more perfect nation until we are honest about the politics of rejection.
I want to tell you about some of the leaders who are building the Poor People's Campaign. Callie Greer from Selma, Alabama, who had to bury her daughter, Venus, because she didn't have health care.
I'm here today to share my daughter's Venus's story. Venus discovered a small lump in her breast and she wasn't insured. Venus had to be approved for every prescription and every piece of medical equipment that she needed. I'm standing here today in solidarity with the Poor People's Campaign because no one should have to bury their child in America because they don't have health care insurance.
I'm 46 years old. I've lived in poverty here in West Virginia every day of my life. And I'm working. I am a working poor with a bachelor's degree. I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
I'm a second generation fast food worker and I've experienced the cycle of poverty firsthand. Growing up, I watched my mother endure long hours of back-breaking labor, doing everything she could to feed me and my sisters. My employer barely pays me enough to pay rent and utilities, let alone with the medical expenses with my mother.
I worked 41 years in the coal mines. I have black lung, and it's just unfathomable what these poor coal miners have to go through in order to get what they have worked for and deserve.
I'm a Vietnam veteran. My only chance of going to college was joining the Army.
It was one thing to know that you didn't have water and you couldn't afford your water. It's a whole nother to find out that they shut off your entire community and none of you matter.
But when I lost my housing, healthcare, and income all at the same time, I was terrified, panicked.
Hi, my name is Pamela Roach. I'm from Downs County, Alabama, and I live in a mobile home with my 2 kids. And I got raw sewage. I don't have no money on power. And I have to travel back and forth to Birmingham to take my daughter with the CPAP machine. Don't have a car and don't have no way to take her.
This is the largest encampment in Aberdeen. There's about 1,000 people in a town of 16,000 who are homeless.
In my community, we were all shut off for the day because none of us could afford our water bills. In the past, my family wasn't able to afford electricity in the winter. It was very hard on all of us.
This wall, this is sin of the highest order.
When there are 38 million poor children, when 60% of African Americans are poor, when 65% of Latinx are poor, when 40% of Asians are poor, when there are 67 million poor white people, we must say, this is not right.
Somebody's hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Our brothers and sisters are sleeping on the streets. For a country this rich to have so many people poor, it's immoral and it's wrong.
Our backs are against the wall, and we got no choice but to push.
We lift our voices for justice. We put our bodies on the line for mercy. And together we will proclaim liberty throughout the land for the enslaved, for the poor, and for us all.
All
that breaking news in Albany, where a large group of protesters have moved into the street.
Washington Avenue between City Hall and Lark Street closed down.
Protesters with the Poor People's Campaign of Indiana.
2 o'clock on the East Coast, 2 o'clock in the middle, 2 o'clock on the West Coast. A wave, and the historians tell us it's never happened before.
Our communities, Muslim communities, who have joined the Poor People's Campaign, you can count on us.
Our democracy is in trouble.
Our democracy is in trouble.
And we come to demand.
And we come to demand. Second warning.
Because it's crucial that we make ourselves heard. No one is listening. We write letters, we make calls. No one is listening. So we gotta find a way to make ourselves heard.
We are the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. And we are here. We are poor. We are clergy. And we're here to say to our nation's capital and to the highest court in this land that everybody has a right to live. Everybody has a right to learn. Everybody has a right to love. Everybody has a right to living wages. Everybody has a right to vote. Everybody has a right to thrive in this society.
Everybody say, I
believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. I believe that we will win. Freedom fighter, and he taught us how to fight.
The poor and their clergy. We read Article 6 of the Kentucky State Constitution that says we have a right to free assembly.
We are demanding that we stop the war on our poor.
We demand the right to vote. For formerly incarcerated. You need to cease and desist immediately or you'll be arrested.
There will be a movement that will break through the con and bring people together to save the heart and the soul of this democracy and this world. While you're standing, would you join me in saying, forward together, not one step back. Come on, say it louder. Forward together, not one step back. Forward together, not one step back. Give yourselves a big hand for being here today. I am deeply humbled and to be invited to be here and to be with such a body as this in times like this. I'm so thankful to the grace of God and the spirit of the universe. To Brother John Powell, where is he? Somewhere in here, let's give it up, and the Institute. And to all of you who are gathered. I want to ask you to go to www.breachrepairs.org, Repairs of the Breach, and make sure you sign up to get connected and to also click on the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival icon. And also, if you would take down 90975 and text moral, that's 3 things to do. Go to www.breachrepairs.org, click on that so you're connected with Repairers of the Breach, where I am the president and senior lecturer. Hook up with us on Twitter and otherwise, and then go to your phones and do 90975 at some time today and click in moral. We the people must refuse to be otherized and ignored. We the people must refuse to be otherized and ignored. If my spirit seems a little somber today, it is because yesterday, the 9th, and some people forget this, would have been the day that Martin Luther King was buried 51 years ago. And in his last sermon on the evening before he was shot down by a vicious system that produced an assassin, outside the Lorraine Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee, Dr. King offered a conclusion that serves us well as a starting point for how we understand our work, our callings in this moment in 2019. Now, oftentimes when we remember Dr. King, we make some fatal errors. One is that we remember him like he was some lone individual and not deeply committed to movement and movement building and organizing. Two, we remember the end of his various sermons, like I have a dream, or I've been to the mountaintop and I've looked over, Dr. Kim, but we don't, and for reasons that corporate America has chosen to keep us from doing it, we don't look at the substance of what he was saying and the radical nature of what he was saying. I was just at the monument last week, and if you go, in my fraternity helped place that monument there, but if you look at that monument, none of his most radical quotes are there. Well, that won't happen today. "51 years ago, April the 3rd, Dr. King preached, and he said this: America is a sick nation. And then he said, we must give ourselves to the struggle for wholeness until the end. And nothing would be more tragic than for us to stop at this point. We must see it through, and we must recognize we either go up together or we go down together." This is the Martin Luther King, the PhD, who was a preacher who was standing with sanitation workers over against even many members of his staff. This was the Martin Luther King that was engaged with welfare rights workers and Jewish persons and others, many others, Cesar Chavez and others who were planning the Poor People's Campaign. This is the Martin Luther King that was standing with sanitation workers who were resisting political and economic otherization with the simple slogan, "I am a man." Dr. King at that time had named 3 evils, yes, he called it evil, that constantly work to divide and otherize people: racism, poverty, and militarism. And he saw them as a triune evil collusion that could not be understood by separating any one from the other. And by the way, this was not the first time he had made the connection. If you go back to some of his sermons at his church in '58, one of them was Paul's letter to American Christians, and he talked about the dangers of greedy, run-amok capitalism and economic injustice and war. This was the King who knew One could not challenge one of these evils without challenging them all. This was the king who understood that we must have a kind of eternal discontent with the demonic forces of racism, poverty, and militarism. 51 years ago, however, Martin Luther King Jr. didn't live 24 hours after he said nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now. None of us could have imagined when he was murdered that he would become a martyr in the struggle, and he was a martyr in the struggle for the beloved community and a multi-ethnic democracy, that somehow after his assassination, he would, within a half a century, achieve the status of a founding father on the National Mall. King had been the target of J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI. When he named these three evils, President Johnson took his open invitation to the White House. When he named these three evils, church people put him out. His own denomination walked away from him. Civil rights organizations and foundations walked away from him, because he constantly questioned systems that marginalize, diminish the place and humanity of some people. He questioned the violence of war and a war economy. He questioned the evil of racism and poverty. And that's why on today, the day right after he would have been buried yesterday, I had to remember this, because we can never speak of his legacy without recognizing how he showed us that the America's experiment in democracy always and will always require radical struggle to move us toward a more perfect union. His was a radical witness that everybody is made in the imago Dei, the image of God, the image of the eternal. And everybody has a place in the beloved community. And he knew some words and an ethic that in 2019, we better know nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back from the fight for humanity now. Nothing. Now, to be sure, we find a similar vision in our Declaration of Independence and constitutional ideals, even though the white men who signed their names to those documents never were truly faithful to them. And yet, we can never give up on demanding what this country has said on paper. Dr. King said it like this: if you didn't mean it, you shouldn't have written it down. Because what any people puts down on paper can become a basis for public accountability. A nation founded in revolution must always remain open to reassessment and new revolutions in every era in order to fight for the full humanity of all people. And so every now and then, since we ought to go back to those documents, like the one that was written 243 years ago, July 4th, 1776. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, mistake right there, all men are created equal. They are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, among which are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted. But then I love this line, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government. You want to have a conversation about conservative interpretation of the Constitution? Well, here it is. We have the right to alter any political system whenever it becomes dangerous and detrimental to the principles of life liberty and the pursuit of happiness for everyone. That is why later on Frederick Douglass would say in the 1800s, when asked about the 4th of July, he said, "You asked me about your celebration? Well, let me tell you about your celebration. It is fraud, bombast. It is wrong. It is a cover-up for evil until you do right by the sons and daughters of slaves. And I would say till you do right by all people." Or 1787, 232 years ago, we the people of the United States, in order to form, let me just put a pause here and say to my friends, I don't know you call yourselves radicals, revolutionaries, liberals, whatever you are, but stop letting the so-called extremists have the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. There's nowhere in the Constitution where freedom is mentioned. And the conversation about liberty does not even come until after 4 moral criteria are met. Otherwise, you do not have a liberty that's worthy to be passed on. And that is, number 1, the establishment of justice. And number 2, domestic tranquility, not domestic division. And number 3, providing for the common defense, not just the defense of a few lobbyists. And number 4, to promote, here comes that word, most of us won't say it anymore today, the general welfare. Some of you all scared to say it. Try it one time. Say welfare. You let these folk make you throw away the language that is ours. And any pretense about liberty that does not establish justice does not provide for the common defense, that divides people rather than pulls them together, and that undermines the promoting of the general welfare is contrary to what was put on paper. That's why Fannie Lou Hamer, in 1964, 55 years ago, at the Democratic Convention, said, "I was in jail when they murdered Medgar Evers. And many of us have had to deal with death threats and our phones being tapped and all kinds of brutality just because we want the right to vote. And if this is America, then I question America. There must be a remnant that is always willing to question America." Or like Rabbi Heschel, who in 1963, just before the March on Washington, wrote to John F. Kennedy. And the rabbi said, "Mr. President, America forfeits the right to worship God until you do right by the Negro, period." Or Coretta Scott King, who after her husband's murder went on a tour during the days between the funeral and then afterwards. And somebody asked Mother Coretta, said, "Your husband was shot and murdered. Tell us about what is violence to you?" She said, "Well, violence is my husband's murder, but violence is so much more." She said, "Poverty can produce a most deadly kind of violence." She said, "In a society, violence against poor people and minority groups is routine." She says, "I remind you that starving a child is violence. Suppressing a culture is violence. Neglecting school children is violence. Discrimination against working people is violence. Ghetto housing is violence. Ignoring medical needs and health care is violence. Contempt for equality is violence. And watch this, even a lack of willpower and an apathetic spirit that refuses to challenge these other forms of violence is itself violent." So sometimes the question for us is, are we going to be on the side of violence or nonviolence? In this moment, we in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, believes we are in the midst, and we must have in this nation, a third reconstruction. We must find a way to make clear today that the moral and constitutional crisis we face in America is not just about Republicans versus Democrats or liberal versus conservative. It is really instead about fundamental right against wrong, fundamental humanity, who we will write off and who we will include. We are in a struggle for the heart and soul of this nation for years to come. In a real sense, right now, we face a question, and we're not the first ones, but it is our time to face it, and that question is whether or not America can be. Whether or not at least the ideals of the Constitution written by flawed men can even be amended and can survive. Because, you know, for a half century now, political operatives who paved the way for Trumpism used Richard Nixon's Southern strategy to pit black, brown, and white people against one another. They have hijacked our moral narrative to frame narrow cultural differences as the only moral issue in public life. And they've tried to paint the resistance to their consolidation of power as anti-American or socialism, and we cannot remain silent while America's experiment in democracy is being trampled in front of our faces. We must have a movement, a moral fusion movement, because not only have extremists done that, many times progressives have chosen to seek how can we find a Messiah political campaign candidate to save us rather than build a movement that will transform the entire political landscape of this nation? Because you do know that Trump is not America's biggest problem. I knew I wouldn't get too much agreement with that. But the reality is, if you think this is the first time we've had a racist president, evidently you haven't read. If you think this is the first time we've had an Islamophobe, a xenophobe, a homophobe in the White House, you haven't read. You missed a whole lot of history classes. Neil Painter, that Princeton scholar, says Trump is the iconography of a too often repeated American reality. We take a few steps forward and then we go backwards. Trump benefits from an audience that's been prepared for more than 50 years. Kevin Phillips, when he wrote it for Richard Nixon, said, listen, if we're gonna win in the days to come, he said, here's a plan to win the country, to control the country without having a majority of the votes for the next 50 years. But you gotta learn how to pit black and white and brown poor people against one another. And you can't use straight up racial language, so you got to come up with code language. And Lee Atwater described what that code language was. You don't say nigga, can't do that after 1954, 55, 56. So what you talk about is force busing, entitlement reform, gay people, prayer in the school, vouchers for private school, and then you get real clever and you talk about tax cuts, which is all nothing but code words because those policies hurt blacks worse than whites, but it also makes many poor whites think that their problems are because of black and brown people. Thereby you split and you keep the 13 southern states split. Why? Because if you can control the 13 southern states in any presidential election, you start with 70 plus electoral votes. Which means you only need 99 from the other 37 states. If you can use this otherization politically, you can control 31% of the United States House of Representatives by just controlling the 13 southern states from Maryland to Texas. And you can control 26 members of the United States Senate, means you only need 25 from the other 37 states. If you know this history, you understand why Trump is continuing to play to what he's playing and why it's not just him, but his enablers. I've used this, and some people said I might not ought to use it, but I think it's fairly analogous to what we're seeing. Maybe it helps people because it shocks you to see what I'm trying to say, because I know most of the folk in here in this room think if we just have the right election, I'm not saying we ought not get rid of him. I'm not saying he ought not, go home to Marlego or somewhere. I'm not saying that, but I do want to say in this room, if you think that's all we need to deal with, that it's just about one person, that is a misdiagnosis of the otherization that is going on right now. Because some people would be glad to get rid of him because they've already used him for what they wanted him for. The Supreme Court, the tax cuts, da, 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 da. So what you have to understand is, how many of y'all ever had a cold? A bad cold? Raise your hand. Nobody here had a bad cold? I can't hardly see for these lights. I mean, this man over here ain't never had a cold. Y'all need to learn him. He never had a cold in his life. Everybody had a bad cold. Everybody ever had to sneeze. Everybody that's had something come out when you sneeze. Okay, that's what Trump is. And that's what his enablers are. They are the symptom of a sickness. And if you're gonna treat the cold or flu, you wipe the symptom. But you gotta get some medicine that gets down in your vein and in your bloodline if you're really gonna deal with a serious. You gotta find out what is it that's poisoning the bloodline, that's causing the symptoms in the first place. Whew. And so we must have a movement, I believe, that is committed, if we're gonna really deal with otherization, to take on the 5 interlocking injustices and evils that thrive on and produce more otherizations. The first one is, we must deal with the issue of systemic racism. To all my brothers and sisters, white, black, and brown, and otherwise, if we don't want to deal with systemic racism, we really don't want to deal with otherizations. And systemic racism is not just about what it does to black people, but as one of my friends, Jonathan Metzall, now talks about, people who are dying from whiteness. Right, and I'm not talking about cultural racism. I'm about so sick of that conversation where somebody says the N-word or somebody talks about somebody's calves being too big. That's ugly, that's grotesque, but that's not the real racism. In fact, the truth of the matter is, in this culture, there's a new book that has come out that makes it plain, in this culture, racism didn't start with cultural antics and grotesque statements. Racism started with systems of injustice, and then the grossness and the words followed as justification for the political racism. Real racism is not about what's in your heart, it's about what's in your policies. You can sit beside me every day and never call me the N-word or never call me something negative, but work every day on policies that have a disparate impact, an othering impact on my life. And so we got to deal with systemic racism if we're going to really deal with otherization. Systemic racism, like voter suppression. No, that's the wrong term. Racist voter suppression. When you leave this conference, don't ever call it voter suppression anymore. Call it what it is, racist voter suppression. Voter suppression is directly targeted at black and brown folk, to undermine the ability for black, brown, and white folk to build coalitions. Racist voter suppression. And guess what? Long before Trump even started talking about birtherism, 26 states since 2008, 9, 10 passed racist gerrymandering, racist voter suppression, and we have constantly seen our presidential elections in 2000 in the 21st century be impacted by the Electoral College, one of the last vestiges of the politics of a slave nation that works in collusion to keep extremists in office. Racist voter suppression, redistricting, gerrymandering. There are racist voter suppression. Every state of those 13 states I mentioned has engaged in racist voter suppression. Now, here's the irony, my brothers and sisters. You want to talk about a real irony of evil or a real ugliness of evil. We did a study in the Poor People's Campaign, and we looked at all the states that had passed racist voter suppression laws, and then we mapped those states based on poverty, based on women's rights, based on LGBTQ rights, based on labor rights, based on health care, based on living wage. And guess what? Every state that has engaged in racist voter suppression laws, those laws have allowed people to get elected whom once they get elected, they pass policies that hurt mostly white people. I go to conferences all the time, and people are talking about issues, and they act as though voter suppression is just a black issue. It's targeted at black and brown people. But understand, racism is ultimately against humanity. The same states that are voter suppression states denied health care expansion. The same states that are voter suppression states have the highest levels of child poverty and women in poverty. The same states that engaged in racist voter suppression block living wages and labor rights. The same states that pass racist voter suppression laws have the weakest laws to support the LGBTQ community. So you cannot be concerned about all these other issues and not be fundamentally concerned about America's original sin that continues to be perpetrated through things like racist voter suppression, resegregation in high-poverty schools, mass incarceration, the constant racist badgering of our immigrant brothers and sisters, where now it's becoming okay for people to use terminology to promote racist policies against our immigrant brothers and sisters that could very well be lifted from transcripts of Hitler. And don't forget the constant racist attack on our First Nation and Native people who experienced the first genocide in this land. There is no way to fight otherization without dealing with systemic racism. But not only that, if we're going to deal with systemic racism, we've also got to deal with the reality of systemic poverty. Somebody say systemic poverty. Systemic poverty, systemic poverty. Right now in this country, there are 140 million poor people. Don't you ever believe the government stat again that says only 37, 40 million people. When you look at the poor, poverty, and low wealth, there are 140 million people that are being othered as poor and low wealth. That's 43.5% of this nation. That's 60% of black people, which is 26 million black people. That's 33% of white people, but 66 million white people, which means that 40 million more white people are poor per capita than black, even though 60% of black people are poor and low wealth in the richest nation in the world. In this nation, 400 of the wealthiest Americans own more wealth than the bottom 64%. 400 families earn an average of $97,000 an hour, while they will lock you up in this country for going in the street for 15 and a union. Now, I hear some of you saying, but Reverend Barber, we hear these facts. Why the facts? Because most people don't know it. And we are accepting the otherization. And too many people don't understand that the real crisis is not our border, because really the people in Mexico didn't cross the border. Our borders crossed them in the 1800s, if I can tell the truth. When Texas wanted to keep its slaves, and Mexico was anti-slavery before Texas. That's why as a black man and a Tuscaroran Indian, you ain't gonna never get me to be against Latino people, because I know who wanted my freedom first. You can't run that game on me. But the real emergency is not at the border, it's in the borders. The poverty. The lie about scarcity. The damn lie about scarcity. Huh? There's no scarcity when we want to give $2 and $3 trillion tax cuts to those who don't need it. Huh? Over the years, last 30 years, Dr. King was talking about poverty and 50 years ago, and the word poverty has also almost been erased from our national dialogue. We had 26 presidential debates in 2016, Democrat and Republican, and not one of them was on systemic racism or poverty. Not one, with 43.5% of the people of this country living in poverty. And over the last 3 years, rents have gone up faster than income in nearly every urban area in this country. Since 2010, the affordable housing stock has declined by 60%. In 2016, listen, there was no state in America or county in this nation where somebody earning the federal minimum wage of $7.25 could afford a 2-bedroom apartment at market rate. Nowhere in America. Nowhere. In most places, you'd have to work 80 to 84 hours a week just to earn a basic 2-room apartment. And there are 500,000, over 500,000 people experiencing homelessness every night in the richest nation in the world, with empty houses everywhere. And of this population, 41% are black, 47% are white. 2.5 to 3.5 million people are sheltered homeless. 7.4 million are estimated on the brink of homelessness. The largest number of women and young people are LGBTQ youth, who represent 20 to 40% of the homeless population. And yet, every time a presidential caravan comes into a city, they make sure they take the route around. And sometimes even we do. We come to our conferences straight from the airport, straight to the hotel, and never even see, we're never even shown a picture of what it's really like in San Francisco or Oakland. And nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back on facing the issue of systemic racism and poverty. But not only that, we have to address the war economy and militarism. Because every time somebody asks, where can we get the money to do right by the poor? It's in the military and militarism. At the height of the Vietnam War, the military was spending $354 billion. Today, we're spending $668 billion, while anti-poverty programs only receive $190 billion. 53 cents, and if Trump and his warmongers have their way, it's going to be 62 cents of every discretionary dollar will go to war, while only 15 cents goes to anti-poverty program, and they're trying to cut that as well. By 2023, the goal is to so otherize the poor that only 12 cents of every discretionary dollar goes to the poor. Nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now and to fight for humanity and for who's included. We must resist being silent on the issue of otherization and who's going to be included. We have spent nearly $5.6 trillion in Afghanistan, and Iraq, Syria. It's $5.6 trillion. And yet, everybody, when they talk about how are we going to fund health care, we're going to have to raise taxes. No, if we would stop funding so much death, we could fund life. And the majority of what we're funding now are military contractors, not even our soldiers. And military contractors earn an average of $19.2 million a year, the CEOs, while the average combat soldier only earns $30,000 a year, which means that even here in many places they would be considered living in poverty. And in 2012, more military personnel died from suicide than the battlefield. And then there's this fourth interlocking injustice and evil that promotes and fuels otherization, and that is ecological devastation. Fossil fuel and chemical and other industries are poisoning the air, the water. No, they're not. They're poisoning the air, the water, and the land closest to the most marginalized people. Let's be real about it. Now, eventually, if it gets in the air, it's going to kill everybody. It seems like they would know that. But right now, an estimated 9 million premature deaths occurred worldwide in 2015. 3 times as many deaths from AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria coming from poisoning our environment. Water pollution alone kills 1.8 million people a year around the world. And in the US, 13.8 million low-income houses cannot afford water. And while we talk about Flint and the governor should go to jail, right under the jail for what they really did, but the reality is 4 million families get up every day and they can buy unleaded gas and can't buy unleaded water. And the 20 counties with the highest percentage of households lacking access to plumbing are all rural counties, and 13 of those counties are majority Native American and Alaskan Native population. It is the policy of otherization. Kill them. Poison them. And nothing would be more tragic than for us to turn back now on fighting for full humanity and who will be included. And then, not only do we have that, 37 million people, even with the Affordable Care Act, are without health care. Do you know what that translates to? When 5,600 people die for every 1 million that are denied health care, that's 24 people every hour. That's policy murder. Because all the people in the Congress that are fighting people getting health care free, get free health care by virtue of being elected. And for the life of me, I just can't believe that when they were born, their mama looked at them and picked them up and said, God, I thank you for giving me a child that will keep other folk from having health care. God, I just thank you. I am so glad that you let me have this child that will help other people die. It's the most blessed thing in the world, Lord. Thank you. Where did folk become so sickened in their spirit? And we must fight not against our fellow citizens, but against the systems and the evils that are destroying them in hopes that even some of them will be transformed. In my days, there are days I pray for Trump. Because if a man could do this much foolishness with lies and hate, how much good could he do with truth and love? I mean, I really do. I don't want to other nobody. I believe in the possibility of everybody's redemption. If it never happens, I have to believe it. And that's why I can't fight you like you fight me, because I can't become what I hate. You hear what I said? And then lastly, oh yes, there's this fifth thing that really fosters otherization, and that is the false and distorted narrative of Christian and religious nationalism. Lord have mercy. When you have these people claiming they're speaking on behalf of God, and they say so much about what God says so little, and so little about what God says so much. Let me give you all a news flash. Ain't no such thing as Christian right or Christian left. You either Christian or you ain't. It's kind of like being pregnant. And you don't get to choose. You don't get to choose what the ethic is. You don't just get to say, well, this is the Christian right. If you call it Christian, you got to run by Jesus. And Jesus was clear about his public policy agenda. And he ain't no Republican, and he's not a Democrat. But I heard him in the Bible. Oh, Lord, I'm ready to have a Bible conversation, because Jesus said, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he hath anointed me to preach good news to the poor. In Greek, that's patokos. It means those who've been made poor by the economic and just systems in this world. That's what he said at the beginning of his life. And at the end of his life, he said, I'm going to judge every nation. America, Afghanistan, Egypt, South America. I'm going to judge every nation. How? When I was a stranger, an undocumented worker, did you welcome me? When I I was sick, did you heal me? When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I didn't have any water, did you contaminate it, or did you give me something to drink? And it's high time that we call much of this stuff what it is, modern day heresy. Whenever you have ministers, so-called ministers, who will go and pray for any president, P-R-A-Y, that president, while that president or senator is praying, P-R-E-Y-I-N-G, on the very people that God says he cares the most about or she cares the most about, you are engaged in a lie and theological malpractice. And so these 5 interlocking injustices and evils that promote and feed off of otherization. In order to address them, we believe that we had to launch the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival. Notice we didn't say another organization. We don't need another organization. We need an organism where all of us can come together and do some things together. I know we got our silos, but every now and then, there's a time comes in the nation we must join together in a moral fusion and understand the interlocking injustices, and we meet that with a moral fusion intersectional response. And that's why we've come together, black and white and brown and native and Asian and gay and straight and young and old and people of faith like Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindu, people not of faith but who believe in the moral arc of the universe. And we must stand together to say that America's future depends on yet another revolution. Not just another election, even though that election is important and it may be a part of the revolution, but we need a movement of the people committed to reconstructing democracy and guaranteeing equal protection for every human being, rooted in deep love and deep truth. That's why the Poor People's Campaign now, we have 41 coordinating committees in 41 states and District of Columbia. That's why last year we launched and over 5,000 people put their bodies on the line in 41 states and District of Columbia and were arrested as a launch. That's why thousands joined and millions by video. That's why right now there are 28 bus tours going on across this country with AP and the press embedded, where they're going into where the people are, the hurt people, not people talking about the people, but letting the people talk about themselves. That's why in June, I want some of you all to come to the Poor People's Moral Action Congress, where we're going to release a constitutional justice poverty budget and also an agenda. If the other folk got CPAC telling lies, we need PMAC to tell the truth. That's what it is, PMAC, PPMAC. And then after PMAC, we're going to go back and build power. We're trying to shift this narrative, and we can do it together. The statistics tell us, I was looking at them just last night from a magazine from Prospect, that more people believe in the things we believe in than we know believe in the things we believe in. But we need a sounding in the valley because people are depressed, and we need to go in the valley and cry loud with a movement so that the dry bones can get up and we can all join together. And so next year on June 20th, 6/20, we're calling for a mass poor people's assembly and moral march on Washington, where we want thousands of people to come. And when they get there, we're going to give the stage away to the people impacted by racism and impacted by poverty and impacted by ecological devastation, so that Americans can see themselves. Trump didn't win the election. He lost by 4.5 million votes. He got in because of a racist electoral college, but he also lost because 100 million folks stayed home because they don't ever hear anybody talking about the real issues that impact their lives. Well, it's time for us to change that. And the politicians can't change it. They never have. You have to have a movement that changes the political climate and gives the politicians courage to make the adjustment. Yes, as the Constitution says, we must alter this government. And we must do it until living wages and guaranteed protections from the poor are not seen as a Bernie issue or as the mayor's issue or as any one candidate's issue, but as a moral issue. That expanding voting rights and transitioning away from fossil fuels and guaranteeing labor rights and affordable housing and fair policies for immigrants and critiquing warmongering and equality in education by guaranteeing every child receives a high-quality, well-funded, diverse public education and health care for everybody and fairness in the criminal justice system and fighting the proliferation of guns and blocking the unholy alliance that the NRA has on our policies and fighting for women's rights and LGBTQ rights and demanding that equal protection under the law is non-negotiable. These are moral issues. And so as I close, this is what those who struggled before us fought and died for. It's not new. It's just our time. And we have more than they have when they fought. So we ought to be better. So hunt your neighbor and say, crying time is over. It's movement time. Yeah. And I know we're headed into Holy Week soon, so I need to preach a little bit. Put that time card down. I'll be through in just a second. Hey. I didn't fly 5 hours and bend my hip up not to finish what I had to say. Oh, Lord. 2,000 years ago, out on the edge of what was called the Roman Empire, filled with greed and oppression, violence and narcissistic leadership. 2,000 years ago, there was a leader on the throne who loved to put his name on buildings and said that he and he alone could save the whole world. His name was Caesar. Oh, God. And at that time, a brown-skinned Palestinian Jew named Jesus started a poor people's movement. He called people together. He said, everybody, he said, my house shall be a house of prayer for all people. He called together the rejected. Those rejected by the political establishment, those rejected by the religious establishment, and he blessed them. And through the centuries, a lot of people have tried to make Jesus into a lot of things, but we're here together. And I'm here because in my faith, I've learned that through Jesus and through the other prophets and through the various religious faiths, that the world doesn't change when powerful people get new ideas. The world changes when people who've been rejected come together and realize that they are blessed to show their neighbors that another world is possible. Change happens when those who have been otherized decide we ain't taking it no more. Yeah. I've been traveling across this country for the last 2 years, from the Bronx to the border, from Appalachia to Aberdeen, the deep south to California coast, and it's become clear that people are ready to come together that have been otherized. We've heard from mothers whose children died because their states refused Medicaid expansion. They're ready to come together. We've met with homeless families whose encampments in Aberdeen, Washington, and other places have been attacked by police and militia groups. They're ready to come together. We visited communities where there's raw sewage in people's yards and 9-year-old children need CPAP machines to breathe because of the mold on their parents' houses, and they're ready to come together. We've been welcomed into the area communities of Appalachia. White people and indigenous families and urban African Americans and Latinx have formed unlikely alliances and are singing and protesting and organized together. And we are seeing something happen across this country. There's a whole group of people that are saying, we coming out the closet. We're tired of being on the margins. We're tired of being ignored, and we are no longer going to be otherized. We refuse it. And we believe that a movement is happening and we can build it together. There's a song that says, oh, beautiful for pilgrim feet whose stern impassioned stress a thoroughfare for freedom's beat across the wilderness. America, America, God mend thine every flaw. We got some flaws to mend, y'all. There's some stuff wrong in America, and there's no way to mend the flaws of this nation and be one nation under God with liberty and justice for all unless the rejected people are at the center. I've heard a lot of people say, we've never seen anything like this before, this Donald Trump. Well, you don't remember Woodrow Wilson. You don't remember a whole lot of other folk down through history, Nixon and even before then, who were just as racist and wrong as Trump. Before Breitbart was in the White House, Birth of a Nation was played in the White House in 1914. We've seen this before, and because we've seen it before, we know what beats it. We know what overcomes it. It's when Moral Fusion Coalition, we come together, discovering our common humanity, we link arms together, and we refuse to be denied. One of my favorite passages of scripture is the one in Psalm 118 that says the stones that the builders rejected can now become the chief cornerstones. In other words, the scripture says when God wants to produce a revival, he goes to the rejected. And I bet you in this room, there are some people here who've known rejection. Am I right about it? I need about 25 of y'all to make your way to the stage if you're known rejection. Some of you been rejected because of your sexuality. Come on up here. Some of you been rejected because of who you love. Some of you been rejected because of how you were born. Some of you been, come on around the other side. Some of you been rejected because of your Palestinian ancestry. Because of you been rejected because somebody needed somebody to hate in order to try to feel good about themselves. Aren't there some folk in this room who've known rejection? You've been rejected because of your income. You've been rejected because of your faith. You've been rejected because of your race. Where are you? You've been rejected because of your lack of faith. You've been rejected because somebody decided in their own ugly ideology that they had a right to demean your humanity. And you've been rejected. But I want you to know, in San Francisco at 4:45 p.m., I want you to know that tonight, the day the stones that the builders rejected are coming together to build a new cornerstone here in America. I want you to know that today, when hands that once picked cotton join Latino hands and join progressive white hands and join faith hands and join labor hands and join Asian hands and join Native American hands and join poor hands and join wealthy hands with a conscience and join gay hands and join straight hands and join trans hands and join Christian hands and Jewish hands and Muslim hands and Buddhist hands, when we all get together, when the rejected join hands together, we can turn this nation around. We can turn this nation. We can alter the course of history. Together, we will make sure that hope, not hate, has the last word. Together, we will ensure that all of God's children are taken care of. Together, we will make sure that nobody is invisible in this world. Together. Can I preach for 5 minutes? Yes. I know the power of getting together, because when Moses and the people that had been rejected got together and his rod got together, Pharaoh came down and the Red Sea had to open up. When Esther and her uncle Mordecai got together, the rejected, they were able to stop the plots of a mean narcissistic leader in her day. When David was overlooked by Samuel, but when he and his slingshot got together with his faith, Goliath fell. And the next day, the San Francisco Chronicle read, the bigger they come, the harder they fall. When Shadrach, Meshach, and that bad Negro got together, way down in the fiery furnace, God blessed them and God brought them out of the fiery furnace. The truth is, when we who are rejected have come together, we've never lost. We might have been beaten, we might have been broken, but justice has never lost. I didn't say justice had never been fought and justice had never been hurt, but it's never lost. During slavery, it looked like justice had lost, but when Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and some white Quakers and white evangelicals got together, they formed a movement and brought about abolition. When women didn't have the right to vote, it was Sojourner Truth, a black woman, and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott and Frederick Douglass. When they got together, women won the right to vote. Plessy versus Ferguson looked like it had the victory. But when Thurgood Marshall got white lawyers and black lawyers and Jewish lawyers and an all-white Supreme Court, one member, a former member of the KKK, but when they got together, they had to vote 9-0 that separate but equal was unconstitutional. It looked like Jim Crow had been beaten down. Justice couldn't rise again. But when Rosa Parks and Martin King and Bayard Rustin, who was gay, and Glenn Smiley and Jonathan Daniels and a white woman named Viola Luwusa and so many others got together, they tore Jim Crow down. And 26 years ago, when the doctor said I would never walk together, because for 12 years I was on a walker and in a wheelchair. But when my faith got together and my doctors got together and my pharmacist got together and my therapist got together and my family got together and the prayer warriors got together, good God Almighty. Because when we all get together, what a day! What a day! What a day! What a day! What a day of justice it will be.
Reverend Barber. So I want to thank you for coming to your conference. So I don't know if we have a gift for a number of people, including Reverend Barber and the Right Honorable Adrienne Clarkson. I don't know if she's here. And so I'm going to close out as people go back down to the chairs. And I want to just thank a few people for amazing 3 days. And all of you have been part of this. You came from far, you came from near, you engaged, you saw old friends, you made new friends. You created a space of belonging. But I want you to take this space and this practice of belonging away from here and take it back to your homes. As Reverend Barber said, this is not an event, this is a movement. Are you part of this movement? You learned a lot from the speakers. I learned a lot from the speakers. And just listening in the hall, as the speakers embraced the circle of human concern that goes beyond people, that goes to the earth, that goes to the land, that goes to animals and the oceans. We heard a great deal, and we learned a great deal. And I heard in the hallways, people would say, that was the best panel ever. And then the next one, they say, no, that was the best panel ever. I had chills in my spine when I heard Haben's story of going to Harvard Law School, not because of Harvard Law School, but because of her. Because the way she talked about teaching teachers, the way she talked about teaching her surfing instructor, the way she talked about listening through dance through the fingers of her dance partner. This is an intense time of othering, and it's coming from the highest quarters of power. But it's also an intense time, as Dorian said, of loving and of hope. And I believe very strongly that if we can keep this movement going at every level, that we're going to be okay. But it's up to us. And I know it's not easy. I know sometimes it's hard. And sometimes it's easier to not believe that there's any power in love and any power in hope and any power in bridging. We've forgotten how to exercise that muscle. But you heard from one of the more recent panels of the work in Florida, where people did come together and change something that people had said could not be changed. And for those of you who don't know, we were somewhat involved in that. And I'll tell you, we worked with the pollsters. We worked with the professional lobbyists. And they would say, It can't be done. You can't get 60% of the people in Florida to vote for the restoration of votes for the returning citizens. All the polls showed that it was going to fail because you need not 50% plus one, you need 60% to change the Constitution in Florida. And they didn't get 60%, they got 65%. And there are people in Florida who's still fighting, trying to find other ways to disenfranchise people. But this is the largest enfranchisement in America since 1920, when women were given the right to vote. This has been an incredible 3 days, and I'm exhausted. But also I'm exhilarated. And as we move around the halls, I've heard, we've had our Cuban friends say, we have to bring this to Cuba. I've had a number of emails from Europe saying, you gotta do this in Paris. No, what about London? We've heard people from Washington say, they've gotta do this in the state of Washington, and people from Maine. So there really is an energy for this work. When I was signing my books yesterday, a Native American woman came up to me, and she said, through her tears, that this was the first time in her life of almost 60 years where she felt like she was seen, where she felt like she wasn't just an add-on to a program or completely invisible. The only tragedy is, why does she have to wait 60 years? We've heard and seen a lot, and it's going to take us a little while to process it. We've heard from a panel on women and feminism and talking about how issues of intersectionality, race, immigration all come together. We've actually complicated the discussion about identity politics, but complicated in a way that allows us to continue to build bridges. And in my closing, I want to take a little time to actually thank some people. Because this would not have been possible with a lot of work from a lot of people. You know, it's one thing to give a party, it's another thing for people to come. So I want to start by thanking some of the funders. And many of them are in the room. And I won't read out their names, you can see them, but there were a lot of them. And what they made possible was not just this conference, but our goal was to have enough scholarships so everyone who applied for a scholarship could get one. And that happened. So no one was returned away because of cost. We started off a few years ago with a conference of 500 people. Then 2 years ago, we had a bigger conference of 1,000 people. This conference was well over 1,500. I want to thank our Emcee, Chinaka. And Chinaka, I don't know if you're here or where you are, but we have a little gift for you as well. It doesn't speak to how much we appreciate and love what you did, but thank you. I want to thank the organizing committee at the Haas Institute. And the committee went beyond just people at the Haas Institute. And it takes a lot of time and planning to make this happen. So I want to thank all of you. And the head of that organizing committee was Rochelle. And Rochelle doesn't live in the United States anymore, so she had to come over from Greece to be with us. But she was with us every day, every night leading up to the conference. So thank you, Rochelle. I want to thank the subcommittees who worked in terms of all the breakout sections. Did any of you like any of your breakout sessions? And I want to thank the workers of the Marriott. And I'm almost ready to let you go for a little while. And people said to me again, how do you feel about the conference? And I said, it's amazing. But I'll know better in 6 months. I'll know better in a year. Because as good as conferences are, it's what happens next that matters. It's what we do next that matters. And we're going to try to support those of you who are doing, and you're already doing, but how do we do at a different scale? So my last two thanks is one to you for coming, for giving your energy, for the work you've already been doing, for the work you will do, for taking this work deeper and making it real. So again, I want to give a special thanks to all of you for joining us for these 3 days. And my last thanks is to our deep hosts who forcibly in some respects, but more graciously in this respect, shared their land with us. The Ohlone people, this is their house. And they opened it up to us. And unless they heal, we can't heal. We have to create a world in which everyone belongs. And that's not going to be an easy process. So I'm going to try to get some sleep tonight. But tomorrow, I hope I see many of you, and I have meetings already tomorrow and meetings coming up to actually make this work real. Because what's at stake couldn't be higher. It's not just what's happening in your neighborhood, it is that. It's not just what's happening in your family, it is that. It's not just what's happening in the country, it is that. But it's what's happening in the world. Will we have a world? If we will have a future, and a number of my students are here, and I say this to them, I know sometimes you get disrespected. I know sometimes you're marginalized. I know sometimes you're invisibilized. I know that you are othered. I know that you're dealing with trauma. But if there is going to be a future, it's because you will be the bridge to that future. And it changes their orientation. So I'm asking you to join me and my students in creating that bridge for the future. And like it was said on one of the panels yesterday, because the work is hard, it's important to live all the way fully while you're doing the work. Don't put off life. Don't put off your children or your grandchildren. We tried to make this conference one that was kid-friendly. I don't know if my granddaughter is in the audience, but I hope she is. I know my daughter is. We want this to be something for all of us. And I'm watching Olivia and her family sitting down front. So let's make this real. Let's do it not always with complete comfort, but always with caring and love. So again, thank you, and I look forward to continuing to grow this movement in the Bay Area and around the world. Good night.
Okay. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around.
Let me interrupt you for 1 second.
I'm rolling, baby. Come on.
I found some flowers in the back of the stage, and they had Rochelle's name on it. So, Rochelle, if you'll come up and get your flowers.
And then I'll continue. Sure.
And I also want to say that Reverend Barber had some family hardships, and it wasn't easy for him to get here, but he wanted to be here with us, not just in spirit, but in body. And it was so important that he was with us. So I just want to acknowledge not only his work, but his special effort to be with us for this important event. Now we can have some singing and dancing.
Okay. All right. We sing this song all the time, but we're making a pledge. Nod your head, look to your neighbor, and go, mm-hmm. Gonna take it slow, one verse. Ain't gonna let nobody turn you around. Come on. Turn me around. Turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Hold that in your hearts. We're going to end today. You need to have your hands free because we got to get to clapping. We are going to sing, put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Now, all you got to do is call and response. You know this. Here we go. Come on. Goes like this. You got to put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Come on. You gotta put one in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. You gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. I know you're scared. And I'm scared too. But here I am, right next to you. We gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one and lead with love. We gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Don't give up hope. Don't give up hope. You're not alone. You're not alone. Don't you give up. Don't you give up. Keep moving on. We gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. We gotta put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. Put one foot in front of the other and lead with love. And lead with love, and lead with love, and lead, come on, with what? Love. Bless your bones.